How do you meet deadlines? Interview question. In this video, I'll share the best example answer to this question. I'll also share what to avoid and break down the strongest parts of the answer so that you can use something similar in your own interview. I'm Amri Celeste, an interview coach and HR recruitment specialist with over 10 years hiring experience, and I make videos to help you get hired. So if you're job hunting or interviewing, do like and subscribe. So first, why do interviewers ask this question? This will be because the role you're interviewing for has important deadlines. It could be a deadline-driven role, such as a project manager or a role where you're regularly working on projects. You might have a tight production schedule, or you could be working in sales where you have regular revenue targets each week or month. Any role with deadlines, and they want to know your approach to meeting deadlines. It could be that the line manager or the hiring manager is a deadline-driven person, and they're assessing a few different skills here, mainly organization. So what does organization mean to you? What steps do you take to look ahead and prepare? Can you even tell in advance whether something like a deadline even looks realistic? And if it doesn't, what do you do about it? Another thing is communication. So this can be involved in deadline related questions because even though the question is about how you meet deadlines, sometimes the answer can involve asking for help, outsourcing, delegating, moving a deadline, or even missing a deadline. And all of these things require decent communication skills in order to maintain your working relationships, or at least to make sure that you don't damage working relationships in the process of working towards a deadline. This question falls into the competency and situational interview questions category because meeting deadlines is a competency that they would be assessing you for, and they will almost always expect you to include an example in your answer. I have a couple of useful videos explaining what competency-based interviews are and how to pass them. Same with situational interviews, so I'll link those videos in the description below. It really helps to understand different types of interviews. The more you know, the more you can navigate any interview and ultimately get an offer. What to avoid? There are 4 things you must avoid when answering this question. The first is not demonstrating any of the skills that are associated with being able to meet deadlines. Some of the things I see in people's answers are that they demonstrate their strong points, but none of those strong points are associated with the skills that the interviewer is probing for if they ask this question. Some people are naturally not organized, and this question may flummox them. They may just think, well, it's a deadline, you just work towards it, right? I've had this answer, and actually not being organized is not a bad thing. In most cases, it's linked to that person's style of thinking, and it can mean in many situations that their key skills lay in other areas. However, if the interviewer asks you this question, then they are looking for someone with that thinking style who is organized. So you need to either demonstrate your organization skills in a way that's relevant to the role by paying attention to why they need someone organized in the role, by understanding the key responsibilities and the duties on the job description. Or if you're not naturally organized, how you develop these skills over time. They are looking for somebody with these skills. Second thing is using overtime as a key skill to meet deadlines with an answer like, I work really hard, I work late or weekends to make sure that I meet a deadline. Sometimes working late can add something to your answer if you're talking about a specific unusual circumstance where you had to do this. But if you're using working overtime to answer this question, which is about how you meet deadlines in general, it actually shows a pattern of disorganization. Because in many cases, if you go for a job, let's say, with a 40-hour-a-week work pattern, that means that the task that they've given you in that job should be able to be completed within the 40 hours that they've given you. If that's not happening, that could mean either that you're overworked and your employer has completely misjudged how long it takes to complete tasks in that role, which does happen on a regular basis, and it could mean that you need a team or an assistant, or it could mean that you work in a style that is not efficient and not organized, and you regularly overcompensate by having to work late evenings or weekends to catch up. Working overtime used to be something that was generally heavily prized in the past, and in some cases it still is. But when I'm coaching clients, I highly encourage them to target jobs that don't damage their physical and mental health in the long term, and I would encourage you to do the same. A major red flag is a company that prizes you working yourself to the bone. So if you have to include this in your answer, think about whether or not it's the job for you. So yeah, overworking is another thing to avoid in your answer. Leave a comment and let me know if you've ever experienced this. So if you've ever been in an interview and they expected overtime, what did you say? How did you handle that situation? Third thing to avoid is going into your interview unprepared to answer this question. How you prepare can be a make or break difference, and I say this all the time, but it's the most common reason that candidates get declined. So if deadlines is a requirement in the role, you need to think about your style and approach to this before you go to the interview. And you can watch this video to get an idea of how you should be preparing for your interview. The last thing to avoid is not including an example in your answer. An example is much more powerful and effective than simply saying that you meet deadlines very well, you're very organized with great communication to boot. An example allows the interviewer to visualize you in a situation where you're already demonstrating that skill. And it allows them to be the judge, which is the format of the interview. The interviewer is assessing your answers, so do include an example. How to answer. The key to answering the how do you meet deadlines interview question is about what you do when you first become aware of the deadline. It's about how you plan and the questions you ask. An example answer is, when I'm given a deadline, I tend to set expectations as early as possible so that people involved know what to expect. I also keep anyone involved updated as I'm working so that if for any reason things move off track, they are aware of the changing deadline. This tends to minimize any negative impact or disruption that may be caused. For example, as a team assistant, I was tasked with updating employee files. Although this sounded like a simple admin task, the steps involved in order to update one single file involved collecting documents and sending out forms, and there were at least 200 files. I could see from the plan we discussed that I would not meet the deadline I was given. I sat down with the manager that had allocated me the deadline. I clearly outlined the steps I would need to take when undertaking this task and the estimated time I expected each one to take. When I did this, the manager actually drew the conclusion that we should push the timeline back by an additional month. With this extra time, I was actually able to complete the task 1 week early, therefore making sure I met the deadline. Although I'm naturally quite organized, which is one of the things that drew me to this role when I looked at the job description, in my general day-to-day approach, I also use tools to keep myself organized, such as setting calendar reminders and notifications. I also use templates to speed up the writing and sending of emails, and even online schedulers if I'm arranging a high volume of meetings for the team. Why is this a good answer and how can I use it? So let's look at how you can use this template to create and form your own answer. In this first section of the answer, this person shows their natural organization skills simply because they have a plan, they have an approach. They're not blindsided by the question. They're saying whenever they're given a deadline, the wheels in their brain start turning and they actually think about the steps taken to do this task. And what's very clever here is the person doesn't directly ask the manager to extend the deadline. Asking to extend a deadline is absolutely fine and highly recommended if you need it. So do include that in your own answer if you ever needed to do this. But in this answer, this person shows their communication skills by breaking down the tasks that would take the longest in order to get the task done by the deadline. And they let the manager who gave them the deadline reach the conclusion on their own. In your own answer, communicating up front so this person can see the work that goes into you meeting the deadline is a very effective aspect to include in your answer, especially if the deadline is very demanding. If you got value from that answer, do leave a comment below and let me know which part you found most useful. Do also click like on this video if you're enjoying it. It does help this video get shown to more people who are looking for answers on meeting deadlines. Now, anytime you're answering an interview question where you're demonstrating that you needed something from someone or you had to persuade or convince someone, any method you used where you allow them to draw the conclusion themselves without you straight out telling them what you want is a very powerful communication skill, because this person feels that they have come up with the idea themselves to help you, even though it's something that you already wanted. It's essentially the power to convince and persuade indirectly. In this answer, this person has also done something that would make them an asset to any team. You may have heard this phrase before: they underpromised and over-delivered. This is so much better than going crazy trying to meet an unrealistic deadline and then not meeting it when people are expecting you to. Let's say you order a pizza and your heart sinks when you see it's 40 minutes away and you're really hungry. Then they deliver it in 20 minutes. It's much nicer than when they say it's 30 minutes away and in an hour you're still wondering where it is. So underpromise, overdeliver is a powerful approach to include in your answer. When you're answering this question, do include any scenario where you agreed a deadline, knowing that the high likelihood was that you would meet this deadline earlier than expected, especially if a colleague, client, customer, or manager was positively impacted by this. So the early meeting of the deadline allowed them to do something or gain something as a result of that. That's the type of thing you want to include in your answer. So this could be something like a bonus that was gained as a result of you hitting a deadline. Maybe you freed up time for someone to do an important task, or maybe you allowed someone to spend a little more time on an important critical project. In this last part of the answer, this person has added an additional explanation outlining their own organization style. And this is really helpful to do in your own answer if the skills you want to show or skills that are required are not demonstrated in your answer. So sometimes the example is strong, but let's say the job was looking for somebody who is comfortable using tools to organize themselves. You need to clearly outline what tools you use. Now you might notice I added the phrase, "I'm naturally quite organized" in here, and just be wary of using this phrase. Use it only if you're then going to go on to explain how you're organized. If you struggle with interview answers, I highly recommend my Top 20 Interview Answers guide. This guide is packed with tough interview questions and answers for your job interview. It includes answers to difficult questions like, what would you do if we didn't give you the job, and what is your biggest achievement? It also includes a bonus question and what you should be asking your interviewers at the end of your interview. So it's totally free. You can get yours by clicking the link in the description below this video. Now, if you're very sharp, you may have noticed the words situation, task, action, result on this slide here during the answer. This is because I was using the STAR method to answer this question. The STAR method is a very powerful tool to use to answer interview questions. It helps to make your answer effective and concise. It's also known as the STAR technique. This is something that interviewers will often expect you to cover, especially with these types of interview questions. So if you're job hunting or interviewing, it's very useful to know how to use it. You can watch this video that gives a more detailed explanation of what the STAR method is, and it includes an example answer to show you how to use it. So I'll also link that video in the description box below this video. Thank you for watching. Like if you got value, subscribe if you want more, and tap the notification bell so that you'll know when the next video is ready for you. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.